Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into something incredibly personal. We're looking at a deeply intimate narrative from our source material, a powerful snapshot of a truly life-altering moment. We're mapping out a psychological journey of heartbreak, harsh realization, and ultimately real empowerment. I want you to imagine standing right there, in the middle of a room, as the reality you trusted completely just fractures all around you. Let's jump right into the text. Part 9. I was done waiting. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And wow, those words just pull us straight into the narrator's heartbreak, don't they? You know that feeling when the air just suddenly leaves the room? You're standing there trying to process a betrayal that hasn't even fully clicked in your brain yet. It's a terrible moment, completely suspended in disbelief. This brings us to Section 1, the ultimate betrayal. Looking right at her own sister, her flesh and blood, the only question the narrator could manage to get out was simply, then why? It's a question loaded with years of shared history and assumed trust. It's this desperate, achy need to understand how someone so incredibly close could do something so damaging. Why? According to the story, Emma just shrugged, a simple, careless movement of the shoulders. And then she said, "He liked me more."
Just like that. As if that explained absolutely everything.
As if her feelings were nothing. You see, it wasn't just about losing a partner here. It was the total dismissal of the pain. Imagine being told, essentially, that your heartbreaking is just an acceptable footnote to someone else's preference. It's a complete invalidation of your very existence in that moment. Which leads into Section 2, the deafening silence. The narrator then turned to Ryan and said, "You knew she was my sister. This wasn't a stranger, you know? This wasn't some random acquaintance. This was family." That one boundary that is universally supposed to be sacred was entirely ignored. The disbelief directed at him here is so heavy because it means acknowledging that someone she deeply trusted was capable of this profound cruelty. But the text tells us he couldn't even meet her eyes. There is a very specific, painful kind of cowardice in that downward gaze. Just an utter inability to witness the damage you've caused. That silence, it hurt more than any lie. A lie would have been something to push back against, right? Something to fight. But silence? Silence is just a heavy admission of guilt with no apology attached. It was over. She walked into the house without another word. The confrontation was done, but the emotional fallout was just beginning. Now we move to Section 3, the family echo chamber. Walking inside crying, her mom noticed right away and asked what happened. But before Lily could even answer, Emma walked in behind her and just said, "It's complicated." Now, look at the parents' immediate response here. Mom sighs and says, "Lily, you'll find someone else." Dad just nods and adds, "Emma can't help it if Ryan likes her." Nobody asked how Lily felt. Nobody asked why Ryan had suddenly changed. And most devastatingly, nobody wondered whether Emma had actually crossed a line. They just instantly built this defensive wall around Emma.
And we realize from the narrative, this wasn't an isolated incident. It was an entrenched pattern in this family. Same story, different year, different thing, same ending. It's the crushing weight of a toxic history repeating itself. Just this endless cycle of neglect, where one child's actions are perpetually excused, completely at the expense of the other's heart. The reality presented here is stark, and it is painful. On one side, Emma got what she wanted. On the other, Lily was expected to understand. There is absolutely no room made for her grief.
She's just required to quietly absorb the loss so that everyone else in the house can remain comfortable. It's a forced, silent suffering.
And finally, we reach Section 4, the final decision.
That night, the physical actions of closure began. Step 1. She packed every photo and letter connected to Ryan into a cardboard box, gathering up every memory. Step 2. She carried it out into the backyard, into the cool night air. And Step 3. She sealed it shut. The crucial point the text makes here is what didn't happen. She didn't burn it. This wasn't an act of explosive anger or some theatrical destruction. It was a quiet, deliberate boxing up at the past, simply sealing it away. Standing there in the dark, she whispered, "I'm done waiting for people to choose me." You can really feel the profound shift in that statement. It's no longer about what Emma did or what Ryan didn't do or what the parents failed to see. It's a gentle, powerful awakening, a transition away from the pain, taking a deliberate step towards self-empowerment. If I want a better life, I'll have to build it myself. And honestly, this is what you should truly take away from this explainer today. It's the deep realization that your value isn't determined by who chooses you, but by the life you actively choose to build for yourself. The past is sealed in a box. The future, however, is entirely unwritten. So I'll leave you with this question. What incredible things will you build when you finally stop waiting?
Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a story that honestly just tugs right at the heartstrings. It's all about stepping out of the shadows and that quiet, sometimes really painful courage it takes to just leave everything you know behind so you can finally find your own freedom. Have you ever felt that desperate urge to just start completely over? To build a life entirely from scratch where nobody knows your history, where you aren't defined by the people you grew up around? Well, that's exactly what Lily's story is all about.
Let's look at the exact moment her journey really kicked off. Picture this. A quiet morning. The house is dead silent. Everyone else is still fast asleep, completely clueless about what's happening. But in that stillness, Lily is wide awake. She's literally taking her destiny into her own hands by secretly hitting submit on applications to out-of-state universities. It's one of those moments that's just balancing on a knife's edge between absolute heart-pounding terror and profound relief. When she finally packed up and left home, she tells us she was terrified of the unknown. But she was also free. Her exact words capture that feeling perfectly. She said, "For the first time in my life, nobody knew who Emma was."
Escaping the shadows, leaving the past behind. To really get why that secret morning was so absolutely crucial, we kind of have to look at what she was running away from. It wasn't just a physical town. She was leaving a family that never even noticed they were breaking her heart. Look at the stark contrast between her two worlds. On one side, we've got the incredibly painful reality of her childhood. She wasn't really treated as her own distinct person, you know? Her entire identity was boiled down to just being Emma's little sister. Every single day, she lived under the crushing weight of these constant comparisons, carrying around this deep, unseen heartbreak that her family was completely blind to. But then, look at the other side. Far away from all that noise, she could finally just be herself. She could be simply Lily, completely free from those heavy expectations.
Becoming simply Lily, building a new identity.
Now, the real question is how she takes this newfound, honestly terrifying freedom and starts the incredibly hard work of building a brand new life from the ground up. This was her blank slate, and here's how she filled it. It all started with that brave morning sending out those out-of-state applications in secret. Then came the grueling college years 1 through 4. She's studying architecture during the day, and then, to keep her head above water, working late evenings at a local coffee shop. Money was tight, and I mean incredibly tight. So tight that she'd actually skip meals sometimes just to save up enough cash for textbooks. But somehow, despite the hunger, despite the utter exhaustion, she looks back and notes that these were the absolute happiest years of her life. And why is that? Because every single success, every exam she passed, every brutal late-night shift she survived, every dollar she made, it was all hers. Nobody else could take the credit. She was building her own foundation, brick by literal brick, and it paid off. She graduated, got that degree, and proudly accepted a position all the way out in Seattle.
Finding a chosen family. Peace in Seattle.
She didn't just move to a new city and get a job. She built this beautiful, supportive new environment that really started to heal those unseen wounds from her past. These are the elements of her new peace. She's working at a small architecture firm in Seattle, and her coworkers, they weren't just 9-to-5 colleagues. They became the family she always wished she had. She had a boss who deeply valued her actual effort over mere appearances, which is such a huge shift from the superficial comparisons she grew up with. And she made a friend named Maya, who remembered her birthday every single year. I want you to think about that for a second. For someone who spent her whole life feeling invisible in her own home, having a friend just remember your birthday, it's everything. It is the ultimate proof that you are seen. Finally, life was peaceful.
The Tuesday phone call. A sudden disruption. But peace, as we too often learn, can be incredibly fragile. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, completely out of nowhere, the phone rang. It was Dad. And the second she heard his voice through the line, she knew something was deeply, fundamentally wrong. He sounded completely different than the man she remembered. His voice was older. It sounded smaller.
"Lily," he said, "your grandmother passed away this morning." Just imagine that heavy, crushing weight hitting you all at once. In that exact fraction of a second, she tells us, everything around her went completely silent. All the noise of her hard-earned life, the busy Seattle streets outside, the hum of the architecture firm, it all just instantly faded away into nothing.
Grandma was gone. And despite absolutely everything, despite the thousands of miles she had put between herself and her past, despite the beautiful, chosen family she had so carefully built up in Seattle, she knew she had to go home. The independent life she had built as simply Lily was suddenly on a crash course with the girl she left behind. She was being pulled right back into the very past she had tried so incredibly hard to escape. Which brings us to a really profound place to pause and reflect on everything we've uncovered in this explainer today. She built an entire new world for herself, forged a new identity, and found genuine, deep peace. And yet, one single phone call changes the entire landscape. It leaves us with this final, lingering thought. When the past finally calls, can you ever truly leave home?
Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something incredibly heavy, but honestly, so relatable for a lot of people. We're looking at a story called Grandma Was Gone, a story of family, favoritism, and loss. It's a deep dive into the really painful, kind of toxic dynamics of an unequal household, and on the flip side, the quiet ways that unconditional love just keeps us going. The whole thing centers on one devastating moment, the loss of a grandmother. But to really grasp the sheer gravity of this loss, we have to rewind a bit and look at the foundation of their relationship.
Just take a second and let this opening line sink in. Grandma was the one person who had never made me feel invisible. Imagine that. Imagine walking through your entire childhood, wandering the halls of your own home, and feeling like an absolute ghost, like you're completely unseen by the very people who are supposed to have your back the most. So this isn't just about losing a family member. For the person telling this story, it's about losing literally the only mirror in the world that actually reflected her worth back to her.
So how exactly did she show that love? Well, it was through this incredibly quiet presence. She wasn't loud. She definitely wasn't dramatic. You know, some families just demand noise and drama to get attention. Grandma was the complete opposite, a steady, silent harbor. The narrator remembers that whenever she visited, Grandma somehow knew exactly when she needed a hug. She just had this deep, gentle intuition about her. It really goes to show that the most important people in our lives aren't always the loudest ones in the room, right? Sometimes they're just the ones paying the most attention. In this memory paints such a clear picture of what that quiet support actually looked like. Picture this stark contrast. Mom would deliberately give the sister, Emma, the bigger slice of cake, which, let's be real, is a small but incredibly piercing act of childhood favoritism. But Grandma, she didn't cause a massive scene. She didn't yell at the mom. Instead, she just quietly cut her own slice in half and shared it. She wasn't just giving her cake, you know? She was giving her solidarity. She was silently leveling the playing field, basically saying, I see exactly what's happening here, and I've got you. It was really in those tiny, under-the-radar moments that this massive lifeline was built. Back when the narrator was little, Grandma would secretly slip homemade cookies into her backpack. I mean, think about the pure warmth of that. Digging into your bag after a really tough day at school and finding that cookie, that wasn't just a sugar rush. It was this tangible, physical proof that someone back home actually cherished her. It was like their own little secret language of love, totally hidden from the toxic vibes of the rest of the house. She never said anything. She simply made sure I knew I mattered. Man, it's a heartbreakingly beautiful realization. In families where blatant favoritism is the norm, the kids left behind often spend their whole lives exhausting themselves, just desperately trying to earn a drop of validation. They try to be louder, smarter, better, just hoping someone will notice them. But Grandma didn't ask for any of that. She just gave this quiet, undeniable baseline of worth. She made sure she knew she mattered simply by existing.
But now, that quiet harbor is gone. The second she heard the news, the narrator booked the very first flight home. And walking back into that childhood house, she said it felt exactly like opening a time capsule. This wasn't some warm, joyful homecoming, guys. It was a heavy, solemn trek back to a place completely frozen in the past. When you lose the one person who protected you, having to walk back into the environment where you needed that protection, it's incredibly jarring. The air in that house was just thick with history.
And that history was quite literally staring right back at her from the living room walls. The exact same family photos were still hanging there. Emma's graduation portrait, still 3 times larger than the narrator's. I guess some things really never change. Time didn't magically heal these family dynamics. They were literally framed on the walls for everyone to see. The whole physical space of the house was just this glaring visual confirmation that the hurt was still there, and the family hierarchy hadn't shifted an inch. The golden child was still front and center. Now, despite all the heavy baggage in that house, the funeral itself was genuinely beautiful. The church was absolutely packed with friends, neighbors, relatives, the whole shebang. And what did every single person talk about? Her kindness, her patience, her generosity. Grandma's pure heart wasn't just some private thing the narrator experienced. It was this universally acknowledged truth in the community. She was just a woman of immense grace. But as the echoes of the funeral started to fade, the cold reality of the family dynamics started creeping right back in. So after the beautiful eulogies and the shared tears at the church, everyone heads back to Grandma's old house, and the vibe shift here is incredibly sharp and honestly pretty unsettling. You go from this public space of shared grief and community support straight into the private enclosed walls of the family home, the exact same place where all that childhood favoritism and painful silence first took root. With Grandma gone, the house is suddenly totally empty of its warmth, leaving nothing but the cold reality of the people still sitting there. And then the lawyer arrives. He walks in carrying this thick folder, and you can literally feel the air being sucked right out of the room. That shared, gentle grief from the funeral, gone. It's instantly replaced by this heavy, suffocating anticipation. Because let's be real, this isn't just some standard legal formality. For this particular family, that thick folder represents the absolute, final, tangible word of the woman they just buried. It is the permanent distribution of her entire life and legacy. We'll begin reading the will. Just 6 words, but they shift the atmosphere entirely. There's such a deep, heavy finality to it. This is the exact moment where the past, the present, and the future of this family are all colliding in one quiet living room. Yes, Grandma is gone, but her voice is about to speak one last time through those legal pages. As those words kind of just hung in the air, one thing became painfully obvious. Emma looked completely relaxed. And honestly, why wouldn't she be? Her entire life, Emma was the one who effortlessly got the bigger slice of cake, the louder praise, the giant portrait on the wall. Her totally chill demeanor in this incredibly tense moment speaks volumes, doesn't it? It just shows a lifetime of conditioning, this deep-seated expectation that things are always comfortably going to go her way.
And then Mom leans in and whispers, "I'm sure the house will go to Emma." Wow. That whisper, it's quiet, sure, but it is deafeningly cruel. Think about it. In the very house that Grandma built, on the exact same day they literally just laid her to rest, the mother is already reinforcing that old toxic family hierarchy. She couldn't even wait for the lawyer to open the folder before making sure the narrator knew her place was still at the absolute bottom of the ladder.
And Dad, he simply nodded and replied, "It only makes sense." I mean, really let the weight of those 4 words hit you. To the father, this blatant inequality isn't just something that happens. It's perfectly logical to him. It's just the natural order of things in their family. The mother's quiet whisper and the father's defeated little nod, it perfectly captures those invisible, suffocating walls the narrator has been trapped behind her entire life.
Which brings us to what is probably the most heartbreaking realization of all. The narrator says, "Even I believed it. After all, Emma had always received everything." When you were told your whole life that you are second best, when the proof is literally framed on your living room walls and baked into the slices of cake you're given, you internalize it. You really do. The ultimate tragedy of this whole dynamic is that eventually, you just surrender to it. She had completely accepted the idea that she deserved absolutely nothing.
So, that leaves us staring right at that thick folder in the lawyer's hands, asking ourselves one massive final question. Will Emma actually receive everything, just like she always has? Or did Grandma leave one last message? Did the single person who ever made the narrator feel visible use her very last words to level the playing field one more time? Well, we're just going to have to wait and see what that thick folder actually reveals.
Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're diving into something deeply personal, the will, a lesson in boundaries. Picture this. You're sitting in a quiet, maybe slightly stuffy lawyer's office. The air in the room is heavy. It's thick with that kind of nervous anticipation and the quiet grief that always follows a loss. An entire family is gathered around a large mahogany table, waiting. At the head of the table sits the lawyer, holding a document that carries the final wishes of a woman who watched this exact family dynamic unfold for decades.
The lawyer looks down at the paper. He clears his throat, and instantly, the room falls into absolute silence. I mean, you could literally hear a pin drop. He begins to read, "To my grandchildren." Let's just sit with that pause for a second. Imagine the heavy, breath-holding tension in that room, knowing the next few words are going to completely alter the course of this family's future.
Section 1. The Unexpected Inheritance. The lawyer methodically lists out the immense weight of the grandmother's estate. We're talking a lifetime of savings, the family home, personal collections, investment accounts, the whole shebang. And as this list goes on, Emma is just sitting there smiling, fully expecting every single bit of it to be handed directly to her.
But then comes the twist nobody saw coming. Emma fully expects this grand sentence to end with her name. Instead, the lawyer finishes by stating that the entirety of the estate shall belong to Lily. Absolute silence. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed. It's this stunning reversal. Lily gets everything. So, was it a mistake? Well, Emma certainly thinks so. Caught completely off guard, she immediately speaks up. "I'm sorry, I think you read the wrong page." But the lawyer just calmly shakes his head. Emma actually stands up, totally in denial, insisting, "There has to be a mistake. My grandmother loved me." She's leaning on that affection, right? Using it to justify her entitlement. And that is exactly when the lawyer reaches down and opens a second envelope.
Which brings us to Section 2. Love without boundaries. Out of this second envelope, the lawyer pulls a handwritten letter addressed to the entire family. And this letter, it contains a heavy burden. It's a difficult truth the grandmother had withheld for years, waiting until she was finally at peace to actually speak her mind.
And here is perhaps the most powerful moment in her letter. The grandmother writes, "Emma, I have always loved you, but love without boundaries becomes permission." You can feel the profound weight of that sentence, right? It hits the room like a physical blow. And the exact moment those words hang in the air, Emma's confident smile just instantly disappears.
Let's unpack this for a second, because this quiet truth from the letter is absolutely crucial. She's defining a very dangerous kind of permission. When love lacks boundaries, allowing destructive behavior to continue unchecked, it honestly ceases to be just love. The grandmother saw right through the family dynamic. She realized that by failing to say no to Emma, they were essentially giving her a green light to cause harm. Section 3. A History of Taking. From here, the grandmother's words shift from observation into these deeply painful, specific memories. She recounts a toxic dynamic that had been playing out right in front of the family for years.
You see, it didn't happen all at once. It was this slow, agonizing erosion. First, sometimes it was just a toy. Then it became taking attention. Then it escalated to taking her confidence. And eventually, it became parts of her heart. It is just profoundly sad thinking about a grandmother quietly watching one child chip away at the other over a lifetime, slowly stealing pieces of Lily's soul and self-worth.
This leads into Section 4, the silent enablers. Because a destructive dynamic like this, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It requires an audience and an environment that allows it to flourish. The true, hidden target of the grandmother's letter is finally revealed to the room.
As the lawyer reads on, the undeniable gravity of her final words hits the rest of the room. We see two incredibly powerful physical reactions. Mom lowered her head. Dad removed his glasses. In just those small, quiet movements, you can literally see the crushing weight of guilt falling squarely onto their shoulders. They realize, in this breathless moment, exactly what their silence has cost.
And here is the emotional climax of the grandmother's truth. The lawyer reads her most devastating thought. What hurt me most wasn't watching Emma take. It was watching everyone else allow it. If we look at the dynamic, the culprit for taking what Lily treasured was undoubtedly Emma. But the culprit for allowing the theft to happen, that was everyone else. The deepest, most agonizing pain this grandmother carried wasn't just witnessing the theft, it was witnessing the complicity of the parents who stood by and did absolutely nothing.
So, the crucial question we are left to grapple with in this explainer is this. What happens when silence becomes complicity? As we wrap up today, I really invite you to reflect deeply on how this might apply to your own life and your own family dynamics. Setting boundaries isn't just about stopping bad behavior. It's about protecting the ones we deeply love and refusing to be a silent enabler to someone else's pain. It's a beautiful, necessary part of healthy relationships. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this leaves you with something truly meaningful to think about.
I hereby grant my estate and belongings to my dear friend, Mr. Choi.
No.
Lo-
Mem thing's wrong.